The car business is rapidly changing, and modern car dealers are meeting the demand. I'm Michael Cirillo, and together we're going to explore what it takes to create a thriving dealership and life in the retail automotive industry. Join me each week for inspiring conversations with subject matter experts that are designed to help you grow. This is the Dealer Playbook. Dave Farrow is a two-time Canadian Guinness World Record holder for most decks of playing cards memorized in a single sighting. He's an entrepreneur, keynote speaker, and memory coach. His trademarked Pharaoh Method was proven in a neuroscience double-blind study conducted by McGill University and is helping turbocharge business teams to perform at new heights. He has said that, quote, "There is nothing more empowering or motivational than discovering the ability for superhuman memory has been inside you all along," close quote. Dave, thanks so much for joining me on the Dealer Playbook podcast.
Oh, thanks very much for having me. This is fun. I love doing interviews like this.
I can't help but notice a lot of the photos on your walls. I'm anticipating probably from TV appearances and stuff. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I'm curious, how did you come to the realization that you had a really good memory?
Yeah, I didn't mean to trip over any names that I dropped, but it's important to get the word out. I love that line. I did not actually. That's actually the first question everybody asks, and yeah. I have to say that I did not have a good memory when I started. This is a trained memory. This is something you can learn and train yourself in, like martial arts of the mind. I had an okay memory, but I was diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia when I was 14. In those days, also, I'm a little older than people diagnosed today. It was just a crazy train wreck of trying to treat it. And I was essentially kind of written off by the system. I literally had a teacher who told me that I would never accomplish my goals. That I have to be more realistic. And my goals were fairly realistic. I wanted to be an entrepreneur, run my own business, have employees, and travel and things like that. And he was pretty mean. So I actually decided to figure out my brain. I went on an autodidactic quest because I found that the institutions used learning method and teaching methods that were not really based on data and science. They were kind of based on credentials. Some educator wrote a book, and then they would use that as their tool. Which is fine if the data is there, but I was going to seek the reality, and I was very open. I went all the way into, looking into mentalism and hypnosis and everything. I learned how to, read lips and a bunch of other stuff in the process. And what I came upon was nowhere near what I eventually developed and started, coming up with my own memory techniques. But the result was fantastic. Once I started using this in classes, I went from, bottom of the class to, well, at first I did really well on tests, and I was accused of cheating. So I did almost a year where I was constantly in the detention doing my tests over and over while they would literally search me. Or one time they took my shoes off because they were certain that the doodles I had on my shoes were secrets to the test, because nobody could really, realize that you can have a superhuman memory. You just have to know how your brain works.
This is really interesting. I had a conversation recently with Scott Flansburgh, aka the Human Calculator.
Yeah, he's a good
What
friend.
You just said reminded me of something. He didn't really say it this way, but it kind of triggered a conversation around the fact that when you're utilizing the appropriate part of your brain for the task at hand, it almost, to your point, it feels superhuman and it feels natural. And a testament to that was with Scott's math, lessons and whatnot. One of my sons, who is deathly afraid of math, just does not enjoy it, doesn't enjoy any of that kind of stuff. When he started doing some of the exercises that Scott talks about using, well, I think he calls it Area 44 or something like that. All of a sudden, here's my 12-year-old going, "Why don't they teach us this in school?"
Yeah. No, I had the same sort of feeling. There's a whole realm of mental training that is kind of skipped by academia for a long time. In fact, it actually dates back to ancient Greece. The very first academy, the very first academic institution made by Aristotle, one of the courses, one of the 8 fields of study was memory. These techniques do date back that far, but at some point it became more of a master and apprentice style teaching method rather than anything sort of formal. And I think it's because it uses your imagination. And there was a big push at one point that anybody who uses their imagination, that's not real learning, that's horrible, and you've got to be all serious and everything. And they took a lot of the joy out of it. Not to mention all the creators, people in this world who are creators, rebels. I mean, just as anybody that Steve Jobs would refer to in an Apple ad, are changing the world. So I think we've kind of come around to it now, and we understand that there are tools and tactics that we can use. And I would actually correct a little bit what you said and would say that the result seems superhuman. People who take my course, they can memorize thousands of digits of numbers in a row. I did a demonstration where I memorized 1,400 words of Cantonese in just a weekend, and that was fun because I could understand what people in Chinatown were actually saying about me. And like it goes on and on. You can do all these things. They seem superhuman, but when you actually get into it, you realize that it's actually natural. Your brain has the ability to remember all of this stuff with about as much effort as it takes to remember, say, the plot to Star Wars. Probably been a long time since you saw that movie, but if you really sat down, tried to write it out, tried to do a test on it, you'd probably do movie, puts information into your brain the way the brain wants to absorb that information. It's as simple as that. We just haven't, taught a lot of people how to do that in academics. We do it in entertainment. We do it in games. Gamification of education is coming someday. It's not quite here yet, but it's on the way. But I think that's really where we're headed, is just understanding how our brain works in that way.
Does what you teach tie in or at all closely related to then the ability to form new habits or build new, healthier habits?
Yeah, actually, I have a book coming out called Brain Hacker, and in my online course at pharaohmemory.com, we go well beyond memory. Memory is basically just a connection in the brain. That's all it is. So the ability to form new connections allows you to have good long-term memory, but also your ability to understand connections creates your beliefs, your habits, your attitudes. There's a whole section I have on the mental thermostat about how we all have a certain level in our brain of success that we feel we deserve. And we've essentially connected that to us. That's our identity. But that can also be responsible for a lot of self-sabotage. Let's say you don't feel like you deserve to be loved. You could sabotage a relationship. Right. You don't deserve the promotion you got. You can get imposter syndrome. All of this stuff is where kind of the real world doesn't match the connections you made in the brain. And when you have the ability to just edit those connections like Slicer does to DNA, you can just edit it and put it back together. You can dramatically change your outlook on life and change your life. I mean, I'll give you one simple hack. Here's a simple brain hack that we cover that's not a memory one, but it's super simple, is just counting. The counting hack is so powerful. So I use an example of how I used to grind my teeth a lot. It was a nervous habit. I have ADD, so I like to tap them and everything. And after a while, they were starting to get sore, and I was really worried that I was damaging my teeth. So one of the simplest things you can do is just carry around a little piece of paper and put a tick every time you do that bad habit, whether it's biting your nails or smoking or whatever it is, or having a craving for bad food, something like that, and just start keeping track. And you'll find, day number 1, maybe you don't notice a whole lot. Day number 2, you'll see a lot of them because now you'll be aware of them. And then it'll slowly decrease. After a few days, you'll catch yourself even before you do it. And simply by being aware and paying attention and counting them, they start to disappear. It's actually really powerful. And it's the simplest little habit hack you can do.
It reminds me of when I signed up for Weight Watchers, and they allocated me, I think, 31 of their points per day. And then I went and checked on my beloved Coke Slurpee and realized that it was 47 points. And it immediately reframed my brain. I no longer desired the Slurpee, and I haven't had one for, the space of 2 years. And that's what I'm reminded of as you're saying that. If I can see how horrendous this habit is and how often it occurs, maybe it reshapes my brain.
Well, here's a neat hack actually for a food craving. I had the same thing with Wendy's Frosty. I was addicted to those things, man. I gained like 20 pounds. It was crazy. And it was because it was on my drive home, and I was very stressed when I got home. I'm like, hey, this is my reward for working so hard, right? We justify all these things, right? So a simple way to do it actually is to use visualization. On some level, your brain thinks whatever you visualize actually happens. That's why Olympic athletes visualize themselves doing a successful run time and time again before they do the run. It dramatically improves your results, things like that. They do things with astronauts as well, like all sorts of people. Event rehearsal is a very well-established science. It's not, woo-woo at all. So take that to one step further. If you visualize something going terribly, it's going to ruin that experience for you. So I imagined every day for about a week, I imagined a couple times a day that I would be eating a Wendy's Frosty, and it was like something disgusting. Like there was mold growing on it, or ants or crawling into my mouth, or it was like somebody replaced it with motor oil or something. And by the end of that week, I couldn't even look at a Frosty. And to this day, I haven't even had one, and I haven't even craved one. Now, I want to be clear, though, it'll ruin that food for you. So be careful what you do. You won't want it ever again, but it'll only ruin that food though. Like I still eat ice cream. I still eat things that are similar. So that's like for a specific addiction. There are other, hacks for other situations.
That's fascinating. Talk to me about your Pharaoh method. You explained a little bit about how you arrived at creating this method, but then you also said that you've got people who have taken your training, who've attended perhaps some of your events, who are now able to remember thousands of digits and numbers in a row, or things of that nature, or to the point of your Guinness record holder, most decks of playing cards memorized in a single sighting. So talk to me about what is the Pharaoh method, and where does one get started in this whole journey of increasing their memory?
Well, any Google search, you can actually find memory techniques. You can look on Wikipedia, go down a little rabbit hole and find some of the basic memory techniques. I learned them as well, but I found them wanting. I found that when you actually try to apply them to a real world situation, I could memorize a few words of vocabulary, try to learn a whole language. All of a sudden, I've got a whole bunch of situations that my techniques, weren't doing things for. And the biggest one for me was focus. I can use a great memory technique, but if I can't get myself to actually pay attention long enough to do it, then I would fail. And that was actually my secret weapon for my Guinness record. The Guinness record that I have is a bit more than just most decks of cards memorized. It's all the cards are all shuffled together. And it has one of the lowest, it has the lowest actually error rate allowed in the Guinness Book of Records for memory. In hindsight, I should have chosen any other memory record other than that one. It's like the toughest one. So you're only allowed 0.5% wrong. Like, so out of the 3,068 cards in my Guinness record, the 59 decks, that's something like 24. Like, it's a very small amount. I only got one error out of the 3,068 cards. And the way I did that was I developed a focus technique to overcome my ADHD. And this is where my system, I use traditional memory techniques, and I teach everybody what exists, and I teach it in a really good way. But then also in the course, I have my proprietary techniques that I develop that add on to it, that take it to the next level. The focus technique is a good example of that. Basically, you have the most powerful computer ever conceived of in existence. I mean, one way to think of it is the brain is the most complex thing that the brain is aware of, that we are even aware of in the entire universe. So the problem is that it has a terrible battery. The fact is that we cannot pay attention to something for long periods of time without losing focus, making mistakes, that sort of thing. We're not robots. The reason has to do with brain chemistry. Just thinking, doing tasks builds up serotonin. It changes our brain chemistry, makes us tired, makes us make mistakes. So what I did was I turned tasks into a kind of interval training where I did work for very short periods of time. We're not talking the Pomodoro thing where it's like 45 minutes at a time. We're talking, 5 to 8 minutes, and I call them focus bursts, and then a short break, and then a burst again. And there's certain rules on how you do it so that you maximize your focus during that time, and you can actually have perfect recall. But the cool thing is, by giving yourself that break in between, your brain chemistry returns back to normal, and you can just keep on going. And I've had students do focus bursts for 8, 10, even one even did it for 36 hours to see if he could. And at the end of it, the problem is that you're not really tired. So he was kind of wired, so he couldn't go to sleep. But compare that to studying in general, where you study for like 3-4 hours, you're exhausted. And that's because your brain chemistry has gone so far into that serotonin pool. And a lot of people think they have terrible memories or they have terrible focus just because they're not using their brain chemistry in the right way.
I need this. And I need this because, it's funny. My father-in-law, who worked his entire career, heavy labor, road construction, he comes home exhausted. Here I am at a computer and a mouse, wasted when I get home, just completely obliterated. And it's funny because you'd go, well, what do? You just sit at a computer and have meetings all day and blah, 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 blah. And it was hard for me to articulate. And until now, I wish I would have talked to you 2 years ago when this conversation came up. I would have been like, well, actually. So at pharaohmemory.com, we have the whole program. And it's originally that focus technique was developed for kids with ADD. But we found that just about everybody really benefits from it. And it might be even a bit of an advantage that ADD people have, because when you ADD in the right way, you can activate hyperfocus. Because most of the time people only do that for things like video games or something, where a kid can't stop paying attention. Without giving away the farm, is there one so you talked about these little bursts. I'm curious now, what are you doing during the break?
Yeah, no, and listen, I'm happy to give away the farm. I want to help as many people as possible. I think anybody who's listening to this knows that this is complex stuff we're talking about. So me just describing how a technique is done, there's by going through the exercises and the step-by-step, you're going to be guaranteed the result. Here, you get kind of an idea of how it could work. So I'm happy to give you answer anything I can. The breaks, one way to think of this is like a high-low intensity. You want to have your breaks be something that are low intensity. Now, I've done reading a novel, for the low intensity things, but to be honest, I actually have reverted to just like watching a TV on Netflix, watching a show on Netflix, like on pause, and I'm literally watching it 5 minutes at a time. And the reason is that I'm so productive during the focus burst because of the strategies and the way that you challenge yourself and tackle something, very challenging, and you can break up your work into tiny modules so you can take basically a bite out of it each time. You get so much done that even with those breaks, you're getting 2 or 3 times more things done in the same hour than if you just tried to plow through and work the entire time, but you're miserable. So I use those breaks also as a reward. But I have had people that have switched tasks, and I tell them that they have to have a more passive task. So reading is fine, even reading for pleasure or something, just as long as it's not too complex material. I've done some 3D modeling. I do that. I'm into 3D printing and design and stuff. So I've done that. But then you go back to the difficult task, which is something like memorizing or something intense that will really burn, it'll burn your brain chemistry. It'll build up that serotonin, burn out the dopamine, your adrenaline will kick in, but that only lasts for like 6 to 8 minutes tops, things like that. And if you try to push yourself further, then the adrenaline kind of tries to compensate for everything else. And then your body produces cortisol, which is that stress hormone, which can essentially, if you try to push yourself too hard, what happens is you actually train yourself to be forgetful. Your brain will essentially try to do what it thinks you want it to do, which is keep on working. Mm-hmm. But it does that by releasing cortisol and adrenaline and other things. And you feel like you're accomplishing something because you're working, right? But at the end of the day, when you look back at that time, they're incredibly unproductive. You're just not getting things done.
Wow.
So it's a matter of like how much you actually want to get done versus how much you want to feel like you're working.
It makes perfect sense. I mean, when we exercise, we are like you drew the analogy to HIIT training, perhaps, where you're going high intensity and then you rest, high intensity, then you rest. If our physical body benefits from that.
Yeah. And I actually have a theory about that I think this is an evolutionary process, that it goes back to fight or flight, think about our ancestors would have spent most of the day relaxing until they saw a tiger. Then they're either like they're running or they're there with their spears or something. But I mean, fast forward just like 5 minutes, that situation will be resolved. Either the tiger's going to leave or the tiger's going to eat them, or they're going to have tiger for breakfast, whatever it is. So my point is that these crises in the natural world, what our brains are evolved for, and the crisis in the natural world lasts about 6 to 8 minutes tops. Have you ever seen a real fight? I mean, you'd be lucky to go like, 3-minute rounds even for boxing. So your brain is really good at being really smart for those short periods of time, because that's what nature needed for 250 to 500,000 years, depending on where you market. And now all of a sudden we're trying to keep that same thing going for 8 hours a day, and it's failing. So it makes a lot of sense. This is my adaptation. Just understanding this can help a lot of people. I think just understanding that it's not your fault. You're not tired because you didn't get enough sleep or something. If anything, you're probably pushing yourself. You're getting your adrenal glands going, and then that's making it tougher for you to sleep later on. So you think you have insomnia, but really you have a focus strategy issue.
So I'm thinking about how the workplace needs to implement more breaks, like make it more okay for more breaks so that employees or team members can actually have a better shot at increasing performance. And I think sometimes we fall in love with the idea of hustle. We forget that rest is as crucial to success as is the high intensity.
Yeah, I mean, it could be compared to a person chopping down wood. The time that you spend sharpening the axe is just as important as the time you spend chopping, right? I also run a company called Pharaoh Communications. It's a rather good-sized PR and marketing firm. So I've got 10 employees, and what I decided to do, if anybody's thinking about this in their job or their place of business, especially because we've gone mostly virtual. We're in the office maybe 2 days a week because I like my employees and I like to give them time.
Right.
The way we've actually become more productive is by having a task-based system. So everything is broken down into tasks and check marks, and you got to do your stuff each day. And as long as you get your stuff done, then it doesn't really matter how many hours you spent doing it. We don't clock in, clock out. We give, flex time and everything, and abilities. And we got tremendously great feedback from all of our clients saying that the work is fantastic. It's really good. And it's because I think when you're looking at, okay, I just have to write this one page, or I just have to do this one bit of research. When you're looking at a quantifiable sum, it's much easier for your mind to get around it. It's much easier to block out all the distractions and just do the thing. And whether or not you're using like focus bursts or you're just focusing in on one thing at a time, I think that's the future of not only education, but maybe even work, like you said. Like we're starting to get to that with the gig economy, and I think that might be where we're all headed because it is the natural place. I hope they give me credit for the focus burst thing, though. I have a note in the song that is our focus strategy for humanity. Like I think we're naturally going to be going there.
Yeah, I think this is amazing. I have so many more questions. We'll definitely love to have you back on the show. But for now, how can those listening get in touch with you and learn more about your Pharaoh Method?
Well, the best way is to go to Pharaoh Memory. I believe Google is being nice to us, and it should pop up if you put in Dave Pharaoh or something. Pharaoh is F with an arrow, right? And this is our logo, the F with the arrow coming out. So
Clever.
A little mnemonic there. And obviously you know how to spell memory. So just pharaohmemory.com if you can't find it in Google. And there's a great deal for your listeners as well. And I stand behind every single one of these. Now, this program, we're talking about this now. This is kind of a redo, a reimagining, because my original program is a bestseller, sold over 100,000 copies. It went all around the world. This was in the early 2000s to 2010. And then we took a little hiatus for a little while because the science was really, really cutting edge. And I got involved in some of the science and tech, and we did our double-blind study and a bunch of other things. I've been writing books and stuff. And now this program is even more powerful than the program that I had in the past, and it's more affordable. So I think that it's something that will help anybody out there, and I stand behind it.
Amazing, man. Thank you so much for joining me on the Dealer Playbook podcast.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks a lot. You're a great interview.
I'm Michael Cirillo, and you've been listening to the Dealer Playbook podcast. If you haven't yet, please click the subscribe button wherever you're listening right now. Leave a rating or review and share it with a colleague. Thanks for listening.